This is a devotional about the book of Proverbs. When I'm reading through the book of Proverbs, once in a while I'll run into one of them that will remind me of a story somewhere else in the Bible. And so that's what I want to do today, is try to relate some of these things that I found. The first one that comes to mind is Proverbs 1:32. For the waywardness of the naive will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. When I read this, it reminded me of a story in 2 Samuel chapter 20 called Sheba's Revolt. Now, we're not talking about the Queen of Sheba here. We're talking about a feller by the name of Sheba, son of Barachi. And he decided he was going to go up against David and revolt, which was a stupid idea because David was extremely popular. But he did, and when he realized his mistake, though, he took off. And so David gets his head military guy, Joab, and some of the army, and they go chasing Sheba all around Israel. Finally, they get him cornered in a walled city called Abel Beth Makkah, and they lay siege to it. And this woman from inside the city gets up on the wall and says, "Wait a minute, what are you doing?" And Joab says, "Well, you got Sheba in your city in there, and he revolted against David. We need him." And she says, "You're going to destroy the whole city for that?" And he says, "Well, we need him." She says, "Well, just a minute, hang on." So she goes back down in the city and talks to the people. And the next thing you know, Sheba's head comes flying over the wall and lands in the midst of the army. For the waywardness of the naive will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. This next one is Proverbs chapter 3, verses 3 and 4. Do not let kindness and truth leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart, so you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and man. This reminded me of a story in 2 Kings chapter 4 called the Shunammite woman. Elisha, he was a prophet, did a lot of wandering around Israel and that, teaching and preaching and prophesying. And every once in a while he would go through this area called Shunem. And when he did, there was a woman there, and she would see him, and she would go get him and bring him into her house and give him something to eat. And she had perceived that he was a holy man, a man of God, so she told her husband, "Let's make a little apartment for him here in the house. Wall off a little part of it, put a bed in there and a lamp, so he can rest when he does come by." And so her husband did. And next time Elisha came by, he brought him in to eat, and he rested. And then Elisha, he asked his servant, he said, "Well, what can we do for this woman?" And the servant told him, he says, "Well, the woman is old, and her husband is old, and she has no son. If her husband dies, there's nobody to take care of her." So Elisha went to talk to the Shunammite woman and told her, "Next year this time you will have a son." She said, "We're too old for that." No, nothing's impossible for God, so next time this year you will have a son. And sure enough, she had a son. Well, after the child started growing up a little bit, he went out in the field with his father and started working in the fields. And one day he had a really bad headache. So the father sent him back with one of the servants to his mother. His mother put him in the bed that she'd made for Elisha. And the boy died. So she sends her husband and gets a hold of him, and she says, "Saddle me up a donkey. I'm going to look for Elisha, the holy man." And she did, and she finds him, and Elisha follows her back, and lo and behold, Elisha does bring the child back to life. And, of course, the Shunammite woman is extremely grateful for this. Oh. Do not let kindness and truth leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart, so that you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and man. This next one we're going to look at is Proverbs 11:19. He who is steadfast in righteousness will attain to life, and he who pursues evil will bring about his own death. When I came across that one, I was reminded of a story we find in Numbers chapter 25. Now God had told the Israelites not to mix with their neighbors. Don't get mixed up with them. But they did anyway. And this one feller, the Bible doesn't give his name, just calls him one of the sons of Israel, takes a Midianite woman into the camp and into his tent, right in front of everybody. And so this feller Phineas, who was the son of Eleazar and the grandson of Aaron, the priest, he picks up a spear, walks into the tent, and stabs them both at the same time. You get the picture. Didn't work out well for them folks at all. So, he who is steadfast in righteousness will attain to life, and he who pursues evil will bring about his own death. This next one is Proverbs 11:29. He who troubles his own house will inherit wind, and the foolish will be servant to the wise-hearted. This one reminded me of a story in 1 Samuel chapter 2. The high priest of Shiloh, Eli, had two sons which the Bible says were worthless men. They would desecrate the sacrifice, and they would do things like use their position to seduce the women who were serving at the temple, and all kind of bad stuff. Eli apparently didn't rebuke his two sons for doing this, and this made God mad. God saw this as Eli putting his sons above him, which is a bad thing. And so God told Eli that he was going to break his strength, that his two sons would die, and that God would rise up another high priest and a family that would honor him, and that Eli and the rest of his house would be bowing down to them. He who troubles his own house will inherit wind, and the foolish will be a servant to the wise-hearted. This next one is Proverbs chapter 12, verse 7. The wicked are overthrown and are no more, but the house of the righteous will stand. This one reminded me of a story in the book of Acts, chapter 5. Now, after Jesus had been crucified, Christianity started to blossom. The congregation got together and they decided that they would have like a community property type. If they sold something, they would bring all the money to the apostles and they would spread it out and take care of the congregation. And they had some left, they would help other people that hadn't become Christian yet, which of course would help them spread the gospel. And so this went along pretty good for a while, except that these two folks, Ananias and Sapphira. Ananias and Sapphira sold a piece of land, but they kept back some of the money. Now Ananias was the husband, Sapphira was his wife. Peter came to their house and called them on it. And Ananias said, yeah, I sold a piece of land and I did keep back part of the money. And Peter told him, you're not lying to men, you lied to God. And Ananias fell dead. And so Peter got some guys and they brought him out and they buried him. A little while later, his wife Sapphira comes home and Peter asked her, did you sell a piece of land and keep back part of the money? And she said, yes, we did. And once again, boom, she falls dead. And they come and pick her up and take her out and bury her. The wicked are overthrown and are no more, but the house of the righteous will stand. This one is Proverbs 14:12. There is a way which seems right to a man, but in the end it is the way of death. This one reminded me of a story in 2 Samuel. King David, has decided to move the ark. Now God laid down specific ways to move the ark. Nobody was allowed to touch the ark. what they had to do is they had to put some poles through these hoops in the ark, and they had to move it that way. So when they got ready to move the ark, they put the poles in there, and then they set the ark up on a cart. It was pulled by oxen, and they started down the road. Well, this fella Uzzah was walking beside the ark, but the oxen got on there and got kind of rocky and started teetering back and forth, and Uzzah reached out, grabbed the hold of the ark to steady it. And this made God mad, and he killed him for his irreverence. There is a way which seems right to a man, but in the end is the way of death. Now we'll look at Proverbs 14:32. The wicked is thrust down by his wrongdoing, but the righteous has a refuge when he dies. This one reminded me of the story of Esther in the Bible. This time Esther takes place right after the Babylonian exile, and some of the captives are being sent back to home. They're Jewish people being sent back to Israel. But some of the Jewish people decided to stay in Persia. And a couple of these were Esther and her cousin Mordecai. Now, the king had a right-hand man named Haman. And Haman, he decided that every time he walked by or came by somebody, that everybody in the street would have to bow down to him. Mordecai wouldn't do this, and this made Haman mad. And so he starts trying to figure out ways to get rid of Mordecai. And he's a lot of plots behind him, and he's whispering in the king's ear, trying to get rid of Mordecai. And he gets Mordecai in trouble. But in the meantime, Esther ends up marrying the king, to make a long story short, and she talks to the king and tells him what's really going on, which makes the king mad. Now, Haman had set up a scaffolding in his own yard, and he was going to hang Mordecai from. When the king found out what was really going on, the king had Haman hung on his own scaffold, and he made Mordecai his new right-hand man. The wicked is thrust down by his wrongdoing, but the righteous has a refuge when he dies. Now we'll take a look at Proverbs 15:9. The way of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but he loves one who pursues righteousness. This one reminded me of another story in 1 Samuel. Philistines and the Israelites were at war with one another quite a bit. And at one point the Philistines had captured the Ark of the Covenant and brought it back to one of their cities, Ashdod, and set it up in their temple, the temple of Dagon. That was one of their pagan gods. And they had a big statue of Dagon in there. So the next morning they come in there, and there's Dagon lying flat on his face before the ark, and so they pick up the statue, put him back up on his feet, and the morning after that, again, they find Dagon not only laying flat on his face, but his head's knocked off, and so is his hands. So they decide they got to get rid of the ark. This is not good. So they pack the ark up, and they send it to another one of their cities, the city of Gath. And so they're sitting there in the temple there, and all of a sudden, everybody in the city of Gath, God strikes them with tumors. And so they go, well, we got to get rid of the ark. And so they decide to send it to the Philistine city of Ekron. Well, it gets to Ekron, and Ekron said, no. We ain't having this. We know what's happening. So they get all their diviners and pagan priests, and they decide best thing to do with the ark is to send it back to Israel. And the priests and the diviners all told them, but don't just send back the ark, send a peace offering with them. Send 5 golden tumors and send 5 golden mice, one for each of the 5 kings of the Philistines. And so they do. They get the ark and they put it on a cart and they hook up some cows to it and they point it towards Israel. And sure enough, the cows take it right back to Israel. And of course, the Israelites now are a little richer. They got 5 golden mice and 5 golden tumors. Nobody knows how big they are, but gold is gold. The way of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but he loves one who pursues righteousness.